If you produce hip hop or pop, this is the video you need to watch, okay? With me today is Bruce. Bruce is a very talented hip hop and pop producer, and he also plays trumpet. He's got lots of skills, lots of talents, but he's also one of our Sync Academy pros who has graciously and generously supplied us with lots and lots of tutorials about how he creates licensable music for music libraries that he currently works with. Now, Bruce has a day job, he has other obligations, so he might be in a very similar position as many of you that are watching this video right now. You don't have the luxury yet of just doing music full time. But Bruce has been able to basically carve out enough time to start to create his catalog, to start building up the passive income that can come with sync licensing. And so I wanted to bring Bruce on here just to show you guys that basically if he can do it, you can do it. With all the obligations that he has, with all of the sort of balancing of his schedule, you guys can absolutely do that as well, especially for those of you that are into hip hop and pop. So Bruce, why don't we get started? Let me know a little bit about who you're kind of currently working with, what your obligations look like these days, balanced with all the other things going on in your life. And how do you keep all that balanced? How do you make sure that you keep a schedule and stick to it so that you're hitting your short-term goals and goals and eventually hit those long-term goals?
Yeah, so basically I'm serving 2 libraries right now. And I also do some music for myself and do some freelance trumpet work, here in the house and things like that. But basically, in a micro view, I still have a day job. So if I need to be at work at 9, I'll wake up at 4 in the morning and I'll do work up until 9, or 8, whatever, up until I need to get ready to leave. And then when I get home, I'll do a couple more hours of whatever it is. And I kind of do that day by day. If I need to go in at 11 or something, then sometimes I'll still wake up at 4. Sometimes maybe I'll wake up at 6 and get some time done if I feel like I need some more sleep. But I work when I'm not working, and I wake up earlier than I have to. Sometimes I go to bed a little later than I have to, but I still try to get as much sleep as possible. Now, in a macro view, because I have so many things going on, sometimes it's a little bit tough for me to juggle what I have going on. So I make lists. I make a to-do list, and I make a schedule of everything I need to be hitting and kind of prioritize it. And so I will schedule days of the week where, okay, today is TV film music day for X library. Okay, and I'm gonna start a track. I'm gonna finish it, and maybe I'll check the mix the next day just to make sure everything's right before I send it over. But today I'm working on music for this specific library, and then tomorrow I'll be working on freelance trumpet work all day. And the next day I'm working on music for library number 2 that I serve, just so that I'm very good with immersion. So if I immerse myself in today's the day for X, then I'm in that mind state and I'm on that grind, and I don't feel like I'm here and there and everywhere. It works for me. So basically, in a nutshell, I work before work and I work after work, and I carve out the time to be able to come here and immerse myself with whatever I'm working on at that moment. And I divide my different tasks up by days so that I know I'm able to concentrate and get the best work, just to give my best work for whatever it is I'm doing.
That is very powerful information right there. For those of you that have a day job, that have other obligations, that have other gigs that you have to do to pay the bills, there's no excuse for not carving out some time to start to build up your passive income with sync licensing. Think of it as your 401k, okay? It doesn't have to be your primary focus, but if you're not actively, regularly contributing to this catalog for sync licensing, you're potentially missing out on that passive long-term income down the road. And that's something obviously that Bruce is well aware of. He has the long-term game in mind. He's not just looking for the short-term buck. And that's what it's really going to take to succeed. So it's really powerful stuff. I hope you guys were paying attention for that. And Bruce, why don't you let us know, why did you get involved in sync licensing or music licensing? What was it about this industry that pulled you into it?
Basically, I've always been a jack of all trades, and I've always liked a bunch of different type of music. I don't just love hip hop. I don't just love EDM. I don't just love classical music or punk rock music, whatever it may be. I like a lot of different types of music, And yes, I do have my things that I prefer. But I also get ideas for a bunch of different types of music. One day I'll wake up and I'll have this really great classical melody in my head. And the next day, or even that same night, I'll be like, I have this dope hip hop groove in my mind. And so I like to make all those things. And TV, film, this industry allows me to express myself in that way, and it allows me to get those ideas out. Not only that, but it allows me to get paid from those ideas. So if I complete that classical thing I woke up with in the morning, then guess what? I can submit that to my library and maybe make a couple tracks in that vein and say, hey, look, I have a bundle of tracks here for you that can work as an underscore or whatever. And then, next week I can go ahead and elaborate on those hip hop tracks those hip hop grooves that I was working on. Say, hey, I have a bundle of tracks of hip hop that can be used, for these reality TV shows or whatever it is. And it just allows me to get those creative ideas out. That's number one. Number two is I really like the idea of not trading my time for money so much, right? And so just recently I've had one of my tracks that I made as a custom thing, actually. Just one track is still being used episode after episode, in 14-second snippets and 12 9-second snippets. I think the longest was 14. But it's being used over and over and over again, that one track. That one track took me 2 days. One day I did it, and then the next I submitted it, and then he asked for a revision. I sent him a revision, and it was done. So in a matter of a couple hours, really, that track was done. And I'm going to be getting paid for it because that show actually has promise of going into syndication. It was with the Discovery Channel, and I just know those type of shows rerun over and over again. So I'm going to be getting paid from that track years from now, and the idea of that happening over and over again with other tracks that I submit is just amazing. The idea of having that passive income. So that was one of the big factors, actually, that got me into coming into this industry.
I would absolutely agree with those sentiments. First of all, music licensing has also made me a much more versatile producer, to not have to get pigeonholed into, I'm just a rock producer, I'm just a metal producer. It has absolutely made me a more well-rounded producer, a more well-rounded musician. And it's because there's so many different opportunities and so many different platforms to get your music placed. It basically demands that you stretch your brain a little bit in your musical creativity so that you can become a much more versatile producer. So it's absolutely one of those beautiful things. Of course, the passive income and the opportunities for exposure is a no-brainer. That's one of the big reasons why I got involved in it as well. Bruce, you've also done artist music. You've done music to supply to basically, the public. What makes sync licensing, making music for TV, film, music libraries, different from making music for, let's say, an artist or a rapper?
First and foremost, I believe this music has to stand on its own. If a lot of the times, a good percentage of this music is instrumental music and it's not being made for somebody to sing on top of it, to put a top line to it. So this music has to stand on its own. So, which means it has to develop in a certain way with just the instruments, with just the music. So, it has to constantly evolve. It has to constantly, has to have this ebb and flow to it. And it can't just be one directional or plateau, copy paste, the same 8 bars over and over again. And that's a really big thing that you do with artist music, because you're leaving room for the vocal. You're leaving room for the artist to do what they do with it, or to do a whole verse or whatever. So you just, get a 4-bar loop and you paste it. So 16 bars so they can rap on top of it or whatever it is. And yeah, you'll have your different sections. And there's a lot of relation here, because when you're making these music, you do have a chorus, you do have a pre-chorus sometimes, you do have a verse section, you do have a bridge, you have an intro and an outro. But the way you use them are different, okay? You don't just add a little bit to the chorus to separate it from the verse. The chorus is probably going to have its own progression. It's probably going to have its own set of instruments. Yeah, it's going to have its similarities to the verse, but it's completely different than artist music, because you're not leaving space for a vocalist, and you're not structuring out the track as if a vocalist is going to sing on top of it. You're structuring out the track kind of like a classical piece, how the music just keeps moving and moving and evolving, and there's no need for something on top because the music has to stand alone for itself. And you also have to think about, okay, this is going to go behind some dialogue. So when I'm EQing, I have to make sure that I don't have too many higher frequencies in there to distract from the dialogue. So maybe I'll cut at 20K and I'll cut at 10K, so that I can leave room for them to speak, which I maybe wouldn't have necessarily done if I'm making music for a rapper or something like that, or a singer, because you want those higher frequencies in there. So it's just a different world. But basically, getting out of the loop trap and having the music speak for itself without the need of a vocal being on top, I think are the two biggest things.
Again, that is $1 million advice right there. When you are putting together background instrumental cues, which is 80% plus of what you're going to find in the sync industry, you can't just throw loops on top of loops and expect somebody to get excited about that. That might have worked when you were leasing out beats or selling it to an artist, or having other purposes for your music. But it absolutely is one of those things where when you need to make licensable and useful music, you have to have a mentality that starts with, where is this track going to get placed? What use is it going to be? What emotion is this going to deliver? What genre is this going to fit into? How can this be marketed specifically for TV placements, commercial placements, film placements, maybe trailer placements, wherever it is that you're going with your music? But this is one of those things that most producers are not thinking about at all, because they're just only thinking about creativity, a cool melody. Oh, I like this sound. And that's definitely extremely important. You got to have great music, of course, but you need to inject that just a little bit extra bit of awareness of why you're making this music, where it's going to get used, and how you're going to pitch it once it's done. And sync licensing will absolutely help you do that, become a much more business-oriented producer. And those are the producers that make this their full-time income, okay? It's not the producers that are just thinking about creativity and music and how do I make this track sound good. That's really important, again. But it's those that can learn how to market their tracks, right? How are you going to monetize this stuff? How are you going to get somebody to throw you money for your tracks? That's what we teach you guys with Sync Academy, making those licensable and really useful, valuable tracks so that a library or a supervisor grabs you with both hands and doesn't want to let you go and wants to throw you money and wants to get your music placed because it helps them as well, okay? So lastly, Bruce, you've obviously seen kind of both sides of the industry here. In your opinion, with your experience in this business, you've probably seen a lot of producers come and go. What is it, or what are some of those qualities that a producer just has to have if they're going to really succeed in sync licensing?
Good question. So I feel the qualities that a producer needs to have to succeed in this industry are, first and foremost, persistence, and just a great work ethic, because it's all about the numbers game. Not every track you make is going to be placed. And when you think about that, it kind of sucks, because you think, man, I spent hours on this track, and then it's going to sit in a music library and nobody's going to place it. But that's going to happen, man. I mean, even in the artist world, you're going to make a dope track that you think with, Drake or whatever. But not a lot of people are going to hear it, You think you know all of Drake's songs? No, you know the ones that play over and over again 30 times a day. But there are songs on his album that nobody really hears because nobody takes the time to look for it. It's going to be the same thing in this world. You're going to make a handful of tracks that are going to sit and they're not going to get placed. And that's just the reality of it. But let's say you have 1,000 tracks out. Well, guess what? You have a thousand possibility of getting placed. So the more tracks you have out there, the more tracks of yours are going to get placed. And so it's really just a numbers game. So the more work you put in, the more you're going to get, paid for it. And the more your music supervisor is going to say, man, this guy's hungry. I'm going to keep coming to him because he keeps supplying me with great music. So first and foremost, it's just work ethic, okay? And secondly, just the mental attitude of playing the long game, okay? Because at the very beginning, this is not going to give you any now money. It's going to give you later money, but it's not going to give you any now money. As an example, when I first started here, I was making music like this for about a year before I even heard from a library. before I heard back from my library, and they were like, "Hey, I want to bring you on the team," and whatever. And then it was like two at the same time who actually roped me in, and so it was really cool. And just celebrating those little victories, like, yes, I got a contract with the library, like that makes me feel good. Yeah, I didn't get a paycheck, but it was better than I was a year from before that. And then I got my first placement, and it was like, yes, let's pop a bottle of champagne. And I literally did that with my fiance here in the house. And I had a bottle of champagne for a year from when I first got started, because I said, when I get my first placement, it's going to feel so good. And just having the childlike attitude of celebrating those tiny victories, that's what's going to keep you moving forward through the custom briefs that you don't get. You know, when you make something and it's like for $2,000 payout, but they don't pick your track. And if that happens 3 times in a row or something, or you submit to a library and they, say, hey, thanks for submitting, but, your music isn't a good fit for us at this time. Or they just don't even respond to you, because that happens too. I know people that happened to me, and it's happened to other colleagues in this industry that I know. So being able, if you let those things bring you down, they're gonna bring you down. But if you celebrate these little victories, that's going to give you that push to keep going and keep making music. And if you keep making music, you're going to get better. You're just going to get better. And the better you are, the more chances your music has of getting placed. So just work ethic, persistence, and maintaining a positive attitude for the long game. Okay, the long game. I can't stress that enough. It's not about the now money. It's about the long game. Okay, so I think that those are really the top qualities that you need to have to succeed in this business.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Persistence, long-term mindset, celebrating your wins, becoming your own biggest cheerleader. It might sound silly, but come on. If you're not celebrating yourself, if you're not pushing yourself, if you're not treating yourself professionally and holding yourself to high standards and demanding that you stick with this, who else is going to do that for you? Nobody. It's really up to you. It's really up to you while you're working in your studio. Now, when I got started, I was much more isolated. I didn't have a support system around me. I didn't have an online place to go to reach out and get that encouragement, to help remind myself to celebrate those little wins, to share knowledge, to get feedback, to do all those kind of things, right? I just didn't have that. So that's why I created Sync Academy. I don't want any one of you to have to be isolated in the beginning stages of this industry. You really don't have to be all by yourself. Again, facing maybe some of those obstacles and pushbacks and waiting for those results to come in. There's just no getting around taking that time to get to those results. So while you're in that place, while you're in the beginning phases and getting your career started, it's so valuable to surround yourself with positive people like Bruce here, who can keep you encouraged, can keep you motivated, and can bring that positivity to your life. That can absolutely be, another cheerleader for you, basically, to tell you, get back in your studio, go back, and open up that DAW. Maybe you don't feel it today, push yourself through that writer's block, and we have tutorials on how to get through writer's block. That's what Sync Academy is all about. We can't do it alone. This is not an isolated solo business, okay? It takes teamwork. It takes you working together with music library supervisors and also collaborating with other producers. It does take a team to succeed. So I want to invite you, if you've not joined Sync Academy, please join us. We have an incredible, awesome, winning team of very talented, hardworking producers that are not getting sidetracked and distracted by all the nonsense that goes on with social media. We stay focused on one thing: how to create full-time income with your music through TV film sync licensing. So if you want to get enrolled, click on the button below. We would love to have you join us. And I know you're not going to regret the first day that you joined Sync Academy.